Hi everyone! Back in the fall I filmed a video that was titled something like 5 neglected palettes I want to use throughout the autumn season, and I wanted to update that for the winter because there's a bunch of palettes that I feel like just don't get enough of my attention, but I love them dearly and I wanted to use ones that I feel are a little bit seasonally appropriate for the winter. So that's what this is going to be, 5 neglected palettes that I want to use over the next few months. The first one on top here is one by Tarte, and this is their Make Believe in Yourself palette. I loved this so much when it came out, oh, I was gonna say last year, but that was 2018, so I think this came out in 2017. And it really surprised me with how much I liked it, given that it's all shimmery shadows, because it's not very easy to make a look out of just shimmery shadows. I mean, there is one matte here, but the predominant finish in this palette is shimmery. But I really like grabbing for this palette to use as a lid color, and then I'll grab another palette or eyeshadow to put on the outer corner just to give it, you know, a little bit more matte color, because again, there's no matte colorful shades in here. I used this so much when it first came out in 2017, and of course it just kind of got left by the wayside over the years. But I love the colors in here so much, and I feel like they're really good for the winter because there's quite a lot of cool toned icy shades that make me think of snow and, you know, icicles. There's a lot of cool toned shades over here that really just make me think of the winter season. There are some warmer ones over here, although I have to admit I don't gravitate towards the copper and brown one that much, but all the rest of them sort of fit into that wintry landscape kind of idea where things are icy blue, purple, but still very soft and shimmery. Anyway, that's kind of my picture of winter in my head. So I'm really excited to be pulling this back out again, just because I loved it before and I just kind of forgot about it over the years. So super excited to be playing with this palette. And it smells delicious. It's like vanilla. I don't think it's quite chocolate, although I think a lot of people do smell chocolate in this. I get a lot of vanilla scent off of this, and I really like that in my eyeshadows. I like when they're scented. Next up is another super shimmery palette, and you know, it actually weirds me out how many brands just put out straight shimmer palettes in this day and age. I feel like that was something that used to happen like 10 years ago and no one ever really batted an eye at it. But it's very strange now to get a palette that's just shimmers and no mattes, but hey, here we have it. The Urban Decay Afterdark palette is beautiful, absolutely stunning, but again, they're all shimmery, so it's very bizarre. These are darker shimmery shades, which are not something that I tend to reach for very much. And I don't really know why. I tend to prefer lighter shimmery colors and then darker mattes. So honestly, I would have loved if this palette actually came in a matte version of itself. That being said, the colors are really pretty and I do need to get more use out of it and just sort of play around with it, because I liked it when it first came out and I could create gorgeous looks with it, but I just kind of left it alone. Again, probably because there's no matte shades in here. But this palette does have one of my absolute favorite colors of life. That is Fringe down here. That is the most beautiful shimmery teal or turquoise that I have ever seen in my entire life. The color is flawless. And the other ones down here are pretty unique as well. Lounge is interesting. It's kind of like it's an olive green, but there's like a brown depth to it that's really pretty. Paralyze is gorgeous as well, and I want to get a little bit more use out of these colors up here, like Supersonic and Sinful. Alter looks really cool. Again, it's that sort of white gold color that I feel is coming back. I see it in a lot of palettes nowadays, and I'm wondering if maybe that's a shade that people are just suddenly drawn more towards. So I'm going to be using that a lot as well. I'm just really excited to use this color palette more, but I am gonna have to figure out how to combine it with other palettes that have more colorful matte shades, because I don't like doing a look when it's all shimmery. So yeah, I am excited to be playing with this one again, but it's not gonna be a standalone palette for me for sure, just because everything is so shimmery in here. Okay, here's a really good one. So this is the Laura Mercier Artist Palette from 2013. It was initially launched, I think, as a holiday release. So when they sold out, it was gone off the shelves, but they brought it back a few years later and you can still buy it now. So I'm happy to report that, because I think most of the palettes in this video are kind of discontinued. But this one, when I first used it, I was blown away at the quality of these shadows. So this palette has two kind of color schemes that work really well together. The top row has a little bit of pink over here, but the predominant shade is purple towards the end. And then the bottom row is slightly dusty pink and then going into like a brown range of colors. I could not believe how easy these shades were to blend when I first got this palette. I think honestly it was probably the best quality of eyeshadows that I had ever used in my life at that point in time, and I was just so stunned at how good they were. And the color scheme itself is very appealing. I often don't reach for a lot of brown just because it's not, I don't know, it's not in my nature. I don't love brown eyeshadow, but these colors down here, the brown ones, are actually quite transformative on the eyelid. Bamboo is not a color I am very drawn towards. It's just kind of boring looking, but when you put that on the lid, it's absolutely stunning. And of course, I like that not only do they have a neutral row down here, but this purple row makes for absolutely beautiful eye looks. I remember traveling with this palette not long after I'd purchased it, and I remember loving every single eye look that I created with this palette, and I never got tired of it, which I think is a good thing. Like if you're gonna go on vacation for a week or more and you can use one palette the entire time and never get bored of it, I think that really speaks to just how impressive of an eyeshadow selection this is. So you can still get your hands on it, and I think it is one of the pricier palettes on the market, but the quality is phenomenal and the shades are absolutely beautiful. And I'm really happy to be using this one again because I have so many fond memories of when I first got it, but I just ended up neglecting it. So now's your time, buddy. You're gonna get used again. I have another Urban Decay palette here. This is the Vice 3 palette. I don't remember what year this came out, but this was the best Vice palette that Urban Decay has ever done, in my opinion. I loved the color scheme of this palette just because it made a lot of visual sense to me. I don't like when a palette throws shadows haphazardly into the pans and then you look at it and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't have any kind of coherence. I don't like when they do that. But this one, everything seemed to make sense to me. I love how there's this sort of matte neutral row here, and then you've got sort of like a blue-green row, a gold purple one, a very, I'd say pink, but there's also a lot of like copper tones in there, and then a darker sort of neutral row as well. I love this palette so much when it came out. I used it all the time, and in fact this ended up being one of my mirrors that I used to stand up on a desk because the mirror is very large, but also it stood up on its own accord. So I used this a lot back then, but I feel like I kind of just ended up disregarding it a lot, primarily because I was using it as a mirror, and I stopped thinking of this as a palette, which is really silly, but it just became something I used daily for the mirror as opposed to actually using the eyeshadow. So one of my absolute favorite looks in here is putting this green called Dragon all over the lid and then taking this matte cobalt blue called Heroine and putting that in the outer corner. It is a stunning look. It's so freaking pretty. And yeah, I'm just excited to be using this again. And I think somebody made a comment in their own video about the Vice 3 saying that they love the shadow quality, but they had started to notice a kind of decline in the quality over the years because it is a little bit older. So when I heard that, I was kind of like, oh, I really need to be pulling this back out and making sure that I'm using it because at some point the shadow quality will probably disintegrate completely. So yeah, now I'm gonna be using it a little bit more. I love the color scheme in here, and I feel like this is actually gonna work out really well with the Afterdark palette because there's a lot of shimmers in here and there's more mattes in this one that I feel like the two color combinations together will actually work because there's colorful mattes in here, which is what I need to pair with this one. And the last palette that I'm gonna be talking about is actually a longtime favorite of mine by Too Faced. It's the Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar palette. And if I had to tell you what are like my top 5 palettes from Too Faced, this would be in it, but I haven't used it that much recently and I need to rectify that. So this was a palette that I don't think everyone loved as much as the original Chocolate Bar palette, but I like this one so much more. And I liked it because more of the tones were warm and sort of summery. I really loved Peanut Butter, which I think is a fan favorite for most people. But the tones that really worked with the Peanut Butter shade are what drew me towards this palette. Specifically Caramel and Bonbon and Butter Pecan. I feel like those colors just make the perfect beach eye, and I love those colors so much together that when I use this palette I tend to gravitate towards those 4 shades quite a bit. So I am going to be using this and doing that look a lot, I'm sure, but I want to start touching a little bit more of the other colors in here because I don't gravitate towards them as much because these ones just really draw me in. So this rum raisin one down here is a shade that I almost never use. It's a taupe basically with a silvery gray sort of cast. Definitely don't reach for that at all, or truffled or hot fudge up here. So I need to be making more use of the entire palette as opposed to just gravitating towards the shades that I know and love. So while I do know that I love this thing, it has been clear to me that I've very much stuck to the same sort of color scheme constantly whenever I'm putting it on my eyes. So I just want to make more use of the whole thing overall, because I do really like it, but it's funny how I've just sort of gravitated towards the same look over and over again. I also believe that Too Faced has discontinued this palette somewhat recently. I feel like it was about a year ago where I started to notice that it was disappearing from websites and stores. And I think they've discontinued the Bonbons palette as well, which is a little bit sad, but I've got the semi-sweet chocolate bar one. It's my favorite, and I'm just gonna get more use out of this one. All right, that's gonna be it for the 5 neglected palettes I'm gonna be using this winter. I take all of these palettes and actually put them right on top of my vanity in front of everything else, just so that I make sure that I'm using them. Because if I put them back on my bookcase where I keep all of my palettes, they'd probably sort of get lost again. But yeah, I put these right on top so I know exactly what I'm reaching for in the morning. Let me know if you're kind of shopping your stash and looking for old products that you used to love, and I'll see you next time. Bye.